joined by two incredible panelists. We have Tabitha Sleap, a management consultant over at BIP, as well as her colleague Gabriele Oliva, who is, sorry.
I'm pronouncing it in Italian, Gabriele, but you can go with Gabriele.
Gabriele?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. Who is the head of data analytics and AI over at XTech, which is the tech center of excellence over at BIP. And if you're not familiar with BIP, global consultancy based out of, or headquartered in Italy, focusing or specializing on life sciences and data science. So let's, please come on over, don't stand in the corner. We do have an exciting demo for you afterwards about what a RAG-based pipeline looks like for particular life sciences use cases. But unfortunately, we're going to have to share some best practices with you beforehand before we get to that really cool stuff. But I do want to start this off with, when we talk about harnessing the power of AI, we usually talk about innovation and what does that mean? It's really easy to talk about, we would like to have more AI-driven innovation in an organization, but we'd all like to know what does that look like, and you get to see this with a lot of clients. What are the things that they're trying to accomplish using these methods?
So maybe I'll start this off. From my perspective, when we talk about innovation, it needs to be business-driven in the sense that it needs to try to generate business value. It's not always going to generate that value. It's a trial and testing. You can fail, and through that fail, you can also learn. But in general, it needs to be business-driven from my perspective, because that way it can lead to business value and can help change, improve the business that your company is doing. This clearly in an enterprise setting.
Yes. I guess, though, on terms of, if you were to break it up, it's often easy to parse it out more on like the revenue generation and growth side of a business versus on the operational efficiency side of things. Are there particular sides where you're seeing the requests for projects tend to land?
I think it pretty much balances out. I mean, I see them on both sides. Certainly, right now, when there's a focus around GenAI, it's a lot around efficiency. So empowering, augmenting the staff that you already have, certainly not replacing it. But then if you talk about general AI, I just feel like it kind of balances out depending on the specific use case.
Yeah, I'm seeing similar things on my side as well. And where I am seeing replacement happening, it's usually in terms of service providers and outsourced folks. So the folks that I find who are most scared and worried about this are actually on the consulting side of things.
Yes, we are scared of that.
But in anything that we can do to sort of like to promote the FOMO within the room as to all of the things that folks should be doing that their competitors are doing.
Well, we take a very people-centric approach when we're working with our clients, particularly on innovation. And I think the most important step initially is to help them to understand the technology and actually what it does. And a lot of our initial interaction is around coaching on that and having those initial discussions to help them understand not only what their problems are, so what actually are you trying to do with AI, but what the technology is. What is generative AI? How can it be applied? And give them some case studies that we've worked with before. So really scene setting before delving in and saying, we want to use AI to solve this problem. It's like, okay, but what is your problem statement? And how are you going to marry one of the solutions that we can build with you to that? And yeah, so we focus a lot initially on coaching and having those discussions to help understand where they're coming from and what they can do with the technology.
Excellent. I mean, we've often talked in the business about the need for translators. And, if you go back many, many years ago, you'd read these data science job descriptions where it was like, okay, well, you got to understand every method that's out there across all the different disciplines within data science. Oh, and you need to be a consultant, you need to be a great communicator, you need to be able to measure business value, and you need to certainly be able to go do your own data engineering. And by the way, if you can also program in Node and Angular so you can do it, mock up a front end and et cetera, et cetera. And before you know it, yeah, those people do not exist. And increasingly I'm seeing folks try and get a handle on how do I parse this out? How do I split out these, what are pretty different personality types between the technical side of things as well as and on the business side of the house? And it strikes me that you guys sort of represent this as a bit of a microcosm, where you've got a management consultant working together with somebody from the tech COE. Is that standard practice for your implementations, or?
Increasingly so. Yeah, the way that our teams work is we tend to pair a consultant, so someone who really understands the market-facing unit that we're working with, an SME in the area, with someone technical from X-Tech. And we find that allows us to really understand the change management side of things. That's one of our key focuses at BIP is really leading the client through the journey and understanding the change impact before implementing any AI. And then obviously we have our technical side, which will help design the solutions and implement alongside the client as well. And increasingly, this is having an impact on how we manage our teams and how we train people, because we're finding that our consultants are becoming a lot more technical and starting to understand data science by working with X-Tech a lot and with our technical division. And similarly, we're finding that X-Tech consultants are actually becoming more versed in the markets that they're working in. So, for example, Gabriele and I have worked a lot on AI and life sciences recently, and I can probably speak for you that you understand a lot more about how clinical development works and how we can be getting the most out of it.
So there's a bit of a mind meld going on between the different teams. And I guess when I see this usually on the customer side, I guess the split that I would often see is the creation of new data and AI product managers and owners, and that would be sort of more the equivalent of the consultant side of things. And then obviously you have your data scientist and data engineer and others who would be then maybe more on the technical side. And so are you seeing any of your customers kind of adopt a similar approach on their end that mirrors what you're doing, or is it still kind of early on their side?
So I think the way that we're structured, many clients are structured in a similar way, in the sense that the data science team kind of is a service towards the business per se. Now, I know there are different models. Sometimes you have data science teams embedded within business departments. I've seen many marketing teams build their own data science substantial team starting there, and then it becomes a centralized team. But when you have organizations to a certain maturity, data science becomes substantially a service to the company, and it adopts this kind of model of empowering the business, providing their insights. They become much more, let's say, specialized on that business than certainly maybe a consulting company like us would be able to, because they work for that company. But we too have noticed that, okay, you mentioned at the beginning, a data scientist at the beginning had to do everything, from software engineering, knowing math, being having good soft skills. Now people are becoming more specialized, and as we work more with the business, we're starting to see also that it makes sense also to have some, let's say, practices within our data science team specialized on specific industries. Financial services is one of them. You really need lots of domain expertise. Life sciences is another one. So I believe that data scientists need to start having that business insight of what they're doing, understanding the business, because it helps drive more insights and get more value.
I think there is potentially a best practice here in a lot of organizations that you should have multiple different career tracks. You have folks who are coming into data science who it actually turns out they really like working with the business. They actually really like understanding the business requirements and that relationship management side of things, and you often end up with data scientists who absolutely hate that, and they will leave if you go in and require that 50% of their time is spent with customers. And vice versa. I think you have on the people who are coming in as more as business analysts or who are consultants, folks who are more general, but who really, really love the tech and want to get much more involved in that and move more towards that. So the degree to which you can parse that out, and it's you will end up with happier teams.
Yeah, and we're trying to foster that with the training that we offer. So people that sit within X-Tech are allowed to attend industry-specific trainings, and likewise, we get a lot of training from X-Tech on data science. So you find that the two kind of polar departments of our organization are actually, the skill sets are becoming more and more similar over time, which is quite an interesting trend. And we're trying to foster that to allow people to become more hybrid consultants who have that technical knowledge but can deliver within a market and really understand that. And similarly, you're doing that in X-Tech as well.
Well, thinking about life sciences, and thinking about innovation, which is usually a people, process, and tech challenge, the people side is often one where I sort of view that you actually have a lot of leaders who fully understand the need for this, who understand the value of data. On the process side of things, there often are existing processes to work with, and even on the tech side of things, there's often platforms that folks have in place. I'd love to understand your sense of like, where is the biggest innovation challenge? Is it on the people side, the process side, the tech side? When we're seeing this in life sciences?
I think obsolete platforms. So legacy platforms that just aren't really suitable to the workforce or what the organization is trying to achieve anymore. I mean, one of the examples that's highly relevant for Domino is SCE modernization. So
for folks who don't understand, who are from life sciences.
Statistical computing environments is one of the parts of Domino. It's where biostatisticians essentially analyze their data, and it comes through from clinical trials, goes through data management to get cleaned, goes to the biostatisticians to then turn them into the tables, figures, and listings that determine whether a trial's looking good or not. And this environment has been quite rigid in the past, but newer platforms such as Domino offer things like version control, which is really good for auditability. So when regulators are looking at the data and tracing it all the way back to source, that really helps with approval of any drug submissions made. There's also multilingual capability within new platforms like Domino, where previously they're tied down to probably one language. Now there is this expansion where, we have a new generation of programmers who want to use R, who want to use Python, and now they can work in their preferred environment within a stats computing environment, which is a huge benefit.
So my apologies. This wasn't meant to be a sales presentation to convince you of the strength of Domino, but I do want to poke on this because it's one where you do have platforms that have been specialized specifically for this purpose to align with these processes for a really, really long time. It feels like that should be about as good as it gets in terms of a solution that is aligned to your particular challenge. So where did it fall down? Is it mostly on the talent strategy that, well, at the end of the day, you're looking to tap into new sources of talent who want to use these open languages and sort of the incorporation of the open source capabilities, or what is, or like why haven't they kept up?
That is a great question. I think that data integration and migration is a massive component. Obviously, traceability and accuracy of data is highly important in the life sciences, particularly when you're dealing with patients in clinical trials. And obviously, moving from a legacy system to a modern system poses significant risks when you're transferring data or integrating data. And I think that prevents a lot of biostatistical teams from wanting to update their platforms. So while it doesn't allow the innovation of multilingual integration and the version control isn't as good, there is a risk when it comes to the data itself. And I think that that's something that really stands in the way of innovation.
Gotcha. I guess my cheap way of answering the question, I guess, would be it's about silos. So we often talk about data silos and the impossibility of accessing them, and that sounds like that's relevant here. But it sounds like there's also then tools and infrastructure silos as well, and people silos that you're trying to break down. And the degree to which you can facilitate breaking down those silos with technology, probably the better in terms of driving innovation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there an element of the life cycle coverage here as well that folks are looking to build different applications with this? So I believe later on you're going to be showing us a GenAI-powered assistant. Presumably that was never in the spec for a traditional statistical compute environment. And so again, the ability to go in and incorporate additional technology elements sounds like it's probably an important characteristic on the innovation side, or reading too much into it?
So I was a bit surprised by the, say, platform-based approach that I saw in life science compared maybe to other industries. You adopt this large platform that maybe you keep for 20, 25 years, you get used to it, and you don't tend to innovate. I think, though, the platforms are an excuse in that sense, because the technology is there, you can decide to adopt new technology. Clearly, there are regulations that do, let's say, slow down certain processes, but if someone wants to be disruptive, there is a chance to do it. I think an example that I saw that surprised me a few years ago is that so many companies in life sciences were using SAS 9.4. Well, VIA was already available. So why not make that? I mean, you're still keeping the same solution. So that kind of surprised me. So, and if you're stuck to that technology, it gets hard to do machine learning. Certainly there are also aspects tied to the amount of data you have available when you're doing clinical trials, hard to talk about big data there. But I think it's a lot to do with more the people not wanting maybe to disrupt due to maybe of the regulations and everything around that kind of limiting you, and you say, okay, I'll get comfortable, just follow the rules and keep on doing my own thing.
I mean, we often tend to think about regulation and innovation being sort of like at loggerheads with each other. Are there ways of facilitating both of those? Because you'd hope that, well, your innovation efforts are going to be more successful if you can have governance around them, if you can provide trust in them, and so that hopefully, at least theoretically, governance could be an accelerator for adoption and thus innovation. Are there ways of driving both of those at the same time, or is it always going to be a trade-off that you have to manage?
No, I really think so. So I'll give one example. In the energy industry, you have regulations that make you give a forecast, for example, of gas or energy consumption over the following days, certain time horizons. Okay, that leads to companies having to build machine learning models to do these forecasts. So in that way, you're substantially driving innovation. The regulator is not thinking of, okay, they'll solve this problem with machine learning. Okay, but substantially, if you want to have high accuracy, you're not going to be using standard traditional models. You're going to start using machine learning models and doing that in a different way. And I've seen that in an energy company where they too were using SAS 9.4. We built a model for them there using neural networks. It was really, really simple neural networks there. We're talking about like 2 layers. They found that the approach was working, and they then migrated to VIA and then started to using more advanced models. But let's say the technology shouldn't limit you. Regulations can, let's say, if interpreted in a certain way, lead you to doing innovation anyway.
But do you find that the regulators are increasing the amount of your needs for going in and providing documentation and for going in and providing something like auditability or reproducibility? Or are the regulators kind of, that's beyond what the regulators are able to consume, and they haven't actually started needing to poke at the solution and understand everything that's going in there, or requiring validation and things like that?
I don't think they're thinking about the technology per se, but they are asking for that level of traceability, auditability, being able to look inside models, so that explainability part as well. People are starting to become much more conscious of AI. I mean, there are AI acts coming up all in European Union, in Britain, in the US, so people are becoming much more aware of AI and starting to regulate it. So those aspects that you mentioned are going to become more important, and they can be platform-driven to make them much more simpler, because I personally don't like coding, logging, and all that part. The platform does it for me. I'm really, really happy.
Yes, I mean, there are things that we were not designed for as people, and going through manual repetitive tasks over and over again is probably not something that we were ever seemingly designed for. But love your thoughts on whether or not, to a certain extent, this can actually be an advantage in regulated industries, because it feels like most industries who want to use machine learning and AI and want to be able to ensure that their models are not just fair, but also just reliable, that they function, that they meet the needs of the business and are as good as they can, that you'd want to be implementing a lot of the validation processes that folks in regulated industries have been building for a long time. I mean, usually the folks on the financial services and life sciences side they're usually still unhappy. They would love that process to go much faster, but at least they have those processes around online governance and testing, validation, and monitoring that I feel like are being reinvented by folks who haven't traditionally faced regulation. So my hope would be that there's like an advantage that you already have folks who understand the importance of validation and compliance. You have folks who are familiar with going in and tracking all of this information and having processes around this. And having platforms that hopefully have those abilities and can streamline some of this. Is there something that folks can build off of there, or is it, no, actually, you probably wouldn't want to go to them if you had to go in and create one of these processes de novo?
Yeah, I think that particularly within the life sciences, I definitely see the regulation and the need to comply with that as an advantage, because, for example, if you take ICHE 6, ICHE 9, there's statistical guidelines that make sure that you have a robust quality and information strategy underpinning any technical development that goes on around clinical trial data. What that does is mean that anything that's implemented in terms of, if it is an AI innovation, will be underpinned by this strategy, which means that likely you'll have confirmed this with the business, built it incrementally with the right people in the room, and essentially, when you do actually come to implement the innovation, potentially end up with less tech debt by rework. And I think that that is something that other industries can look to as an example, potentially draw off of. And I know that as ICHE 6 develops into its next revision, there will be regulations around the implementation of AI, and I think that that's somewhere that we can look forward to over the next couple of years.
So I guess it forces a certain amount of planning up front in terms of these are the things that we should be on the lookout for. Whether or not this regulation actually applies to us, it still provides a guideline of these are what we're going to need later.
Yeah.
On the US side, I often point to the NIST's AI risk management framework as a useful taxonomy of, it's overcompleted. It contains every risk that you could conceive of, which is probably, again, overkill for most folks, but it does provide a useful roadmap of a breakdown of all of the potential risks that you should be taking into account upfront early on. So now I've kept you away from the really good stuff, which is to see, so what does an example of this look like? Could you tell us a little bit about what you're going to show us and what the plans are?
Go ahead.
So we've built partially in Domino a generative AI tool, which we've called BioRag. It's a retrieval augmented, so essentially you can feed in any information that you might like to. We've used the site investigator use case where we feed in site source documents like the clinical trial protocol or the investigator brochure, so that when monitors are actually performing the clinical trials, instead of having to go back and forth with the sponsor of the trial, they can actually just ask this chatbot for answers to their questions, like what is the dosing regimen for the drug that I'm about to administer? Is there anything that I should avoid? Are there any side effects that I can expect from the drug? And I, working in the clinical development setting, have seen this back and forth between monitors and sponsors a lot. And in terms of response times going down, that's actually better for patient safety too, and it saves a lot of time. So this is the use case that we're going to show now.
So a tool that potentially accelerates the clinical trial process, but even more importantly, potentially improves safety by giving folks closer to real-time information that they need.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. Because we see applied, let's say, it's kind of use case agnostic. So what we did build was a RAG architecture using Domino and then external cloud resources. Essentially, we configured on Azure Cloud the LLM plus the storage area while all the processing part is done within Domino. We set up this RAG in a way that's specialized for life sciences and pharma, and it allows people to build use cases. So substantially, for those who haven't heard of RAG, just 2 words about it. What you do is provide a set of documents. The documents get embedded into a database, and then whenever a user asks a question, that question gets compared against the documents that you've uploaded. That answer gets then sent along with the question back to the LLM to formulate an answer. So substantially, you search within your documents for, say, the most relevant pieces that should be the answer. That gets processed by the LLM brain and then provided back to the user as an answer. So building on this...
Is it fair to think about this as sort of like what we always wanted enterprise search to be? So it's
Yes.
a more consumable, targeted, personalized version of...
Exactly. It's a more advanced version of doing knowledge management substantially, because then you can upload your own specific document base. Substantially, we'll see it live in a second. But you can build your own use cases, where for each use case you build the document base, uploading whatever set of documents you want. For example, we've built here one built on patient profiles. You upload these patient descriptions, and they tell you about, okay, this person was sick in this way, had these kind of blood tests, etc. We built another one for statistical programmers, where you upload our documentation, and you can search through your documentation. We built a use case that Tabitha was mentioning. So substantially, you can build your use cases on this, and then through the chat functionality, you can then interact with your document base, asking whatever question you feel is relevant. This clearly can be segmented, so it can be role-based, because not everybody needs to have access to all the information. And yeah, it's pretty dynamic. It's dynamic enough to scale across different use cases. So I'll bring it up. So you can see here the solution. We uploaded substantially 5 use cases here. If I then move into the chatbot functionality, I'm able to select from a drop-down list substantially the document base. For example, if I move to patient profiles, I have here a chat history, and I can ask information, for example, what are the patient names? This will then calculate the answer and extract the information from the documents. Just give it 1 second. As always, when we do things live.
So in every other setting, this would be sort of like privacy worst nightmare. But in the case of a site investigator, this is actually extraordinarily important.
Yes, yes, exactly. So here extract the name of the patient. Wow, okay. Reply it in Italian because the documents here, we uploaded them in Italian. If I then move to our demo case, okay, the one that Tabitha was mentioning, here I prepared a set of questions. Substantially, we uploaded here a drug called Neurocom. So what we can ask here is, what is Neurocom? Okay. So it will explain, it will go into the document base. You see there we've uploaded a set of documents that I can show you. For example, here we have the standard operating procedure, we have the clinical trial protocol. What the RAG architecture is doing is going into the document base and essentially explaining what Neurocom is, extracting it from one or more documents, because this can work cross-document. We can see here that it provides an explanation. If I go, for example, in here, and we want to cross-check it, we have here, for example, that is explaining what Neurocom is. So it's extracting this information, processing it, and doing some form of summarization. Not only can it summarize information, but it can also extract specific information. It's able to do also part of, let's say, insight generation. So, for example, here, one of the questions I prepared is, here, let me get this one. Let's get the exclusion criteria for the study. So if we consider the exclusion criteria, we ask the question. Okay. So it will tell us, okay, who cannot participate in this clinical trial. If we instead ask it for an insight, so rather than asking what are the exclusion criteria, I can say, okay, I am pregnant. Should I be included in this study? What we expect it to do is to process this question and be able on its own to say, okay, these let's say, segments were excluded, therefore, okay, you won't be included in this clinical trial. So from a site perspective, you're able to obtain the information that otherwise maybe it would be harder to obtain, increasing efficiency. And then it's also able not only to extract information, but also to provide insights. On the patient descriptions, for example, we tried forcing, let's say, tough questions. For example, which patient is most likely to die? It's not going to reply, per se, explicitly, because we put guardrails around this. It's important to build guardrails around these because this is not a doctor. It shouldn't be able to answer that question. However, what it will do, it will provide insight saying, based on the information I have available, this patient has the most critical situation. Okay, so it's going to find, let's say, a workaround answer, but that's, let's say, politically correct.
Excellent. So in terms of the backend for this, the LLM here is being hosted where, or what are you using as a large language model?
So the large language model is hosted on Azure. We're using Azure OpenAI with GPT 4.0, the newest version. We really saw an increase in speed moving to 4.0, and it's much more cost efficient as well. We have the storage layer as well, all hosted on Azure, while the front end, as well as all the Python code that's behind this, is on Domino. So the processing is done there.
Well, I guess I'm curious the value of having a platform in front of one of these large language models. What is it that you're getting from doing this within the platform? Is it the orchestration, the creation of that, the creation and orchestration of that pipeline, all of the glue code that you need along the way in between what you're feeding into your vector store and what you're retrieving from your vector store and augmenting the prompt and all of those?
So I would say I see huge advantages from a pure data science perspective, in the sense that once maybe architects or engineers have done, say, the grunt work of connecting the LLM to the AI gateway, then data scientists can really leverage the technology and the processing power of the platform itself to develop all the use cases they have in mind. So that initial setup part needs to be done one shot, because you need to connect it to data sources, you need to connect it to the database, potentially to the LLMs. But then once data scientists start using this, it becomes all much easier. You can do data science and BI, I would say, in a really fast, efficient way, leveraging the scalable processing power of the platform.
Gotcha. So in addition to the fact that it provides you all of those components, the data pipelines and other things that get you up to speed faster, it sounds like there's also, I guess I've seen a lot of pipelines where you have an upstream, a good amount of upstream data engineering or feature engineering, a good amount of even upstream predictive models before you start getting to your large language models, and increasingly folks feeding to multiple large language models or with variations of the prompt to multiple to the same large language model, and all of that orchestration sounds like it's and development can be
it's all done in the platform. Yes, each time we ask the question, it's actually doing two calls to the large language model. That's the way we built the prompt engineering in the back end, because substantially what we do is go retrieve the past conversation, have it, let's say, be processed, then it gets united with the information retrieved from the vector database, plus the actual query itself. So all that prompt engineering part is something that we've built into this. What we've done is also make this available on AI Hub. So this template will soon be available for everybody to dive into the code and potentially use it themselves. And you can see
I want to repeat that though. So if for folks in the room, if you already have Domino, you will be able to get this on AI Hub?
Yes, exactly. So we're planning to release this on AI Hub. We're really in the final stages. The idea is really to make this code available to everybody. It's going to be on AI Hub. The only work that will need to be done around this will be to configure the database substantially and the large language model in the AI gateway, if you haven't done that already. Okay. At that point, once you have those two parameters, let's say, configured, they're in the code substantially, then you can leverage our template, which has all the prompt engineering and, let's say, data science work.
Well, you mentioned AI Gateway along the way here. Is there some value that the platform is providing in terms of auditability of the either the prompts or the responses from the LLM? Are you taking advantage of that?
So the AI Gateway allows you essentially to manage all your large language models. Then what we've done is, let's say, we've also done our own custom logging of the conversations, only because we need to have a really fast database and then feed back into the model due to the conversation history aspect. But then the platform itself does its own logging for, let's say, less functional purposes, more for auditability.
Makes sense. I guess curious, my apologies for putting you on the spot. I know you did not expect to be interrogated on this, but curious if there any scale testing that you've done on this, whether there are like maximum numbers of documents that you can feed to something like this and check performance on.
So you have some issues when you upload really big documents. We're talking like above 200 pages. They start having issues, but that's due to the large language model processing it. As we increase the number of tokens, the models are able to process those as well. And then the scalability of the solution itself is due to the, let's say, hardware that's behind it. So the one that we set up, let's say, in our demo environment, can't scale across thousands of people, but only because we chose, let's say, we size the environment to be used by about 50 people. But then the moment that you decide to use this architecture, it will scale based on the infrastructure behind it.
Excellent. Well, so I've hogged you too much in terms of my questions to you. I'd love to open this up to the audience to get your questions, either on what we were talking about before in terms of best practices, or in terms of when it comes to developing a RAG-based solution on either Domino or elsewhere.
So the LLM that you're accessing is in the cloud, but could you also run an LLM on Domino instead?
So at that point, you would have to host the LLM within Domino. So you need to take substantially an open source LLM and deploy within the Domino environment. So we're using, let's say, one of the GPT because we said okay, it's faster just to set that up. But yes, you can deploy LLMs within Domino, connect it to the AI gateway, and then leverage it as we're leveraging Azure.
Would performance be similar?
That's all tied to the virtual machine that you hosted on and the model itself. So you have those dependencies. I give you an example here, just using Azure services. When we moved from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4 and now to 4.0, we saw, let's say, different latency of the model. And we even have different latencies over the course of a day. Because during work hours, the models are much slower, they're less reliable. So it's really, there are different factors, let's say.
Hi, great presentation. So the question I have is, interested to know how did you evaluate the answers and the quality of answers that was being provided by the RAG solution? What techniques did you use?
Yeah, so we evaluate against some ground truth that we ourselves prepared. So right now, one thing that we want to do to evolve the solution is substantially, when it provides an answer, it also provides you a reference to the place in the document where the answer is. That helps with fact checking. What we did in our specific case was, okay, we took the questions, we had an expert reply to that question, leveraging the document, etc., and then we compared that to the answer that came out of the RAG. And substantially, we had that expert score it. We saw that the performances were over 80%. I think that's more or less to be expected. When you go into very niche questions, it can get a little bit confused in some cases. I would have to say, though, that right now we just moved to GPT 4.0 and we haven't benchmarked that. So I'm hoping that performances go up even more. Like the feeling, just looking at it, is that the answers are better, but we would need to validate that with numbers.
Is that working? Yeah, just now. Thank you. Great presentation indeed. I'm interested in the combination of using the ML together with LLMs. So to what extent are you able to maybe improve the cost efficiency of your use of LLMs perhaps by kind of caching the responses that you get from the LLM and just using machine learning to recognize that you've got a very similar type of prompt, and therefore you can pull from the cache rather than necessarily interrogate the LLM. And if you've maybe got hundreds of thousands of users, that may be a kind of a more efficient way. So is that the kind of thing you're looking on to investigate?
Yeah, so in terms of cost efficiency, I think there are different ways to approach it. One way, first off, is to leverage different models. One thing that we've done for a specific client is say, okay, the difficult questions are handled by the more advanced models that before used to cost more, while you use, for example, GPT 3.5 for the more simple questions. Because you do notice a different quality of the answers. Now, I believe that with GPT 4.0, you're not going to have that problem because it costs less and it replies better. Okay? But again, we don't have numbers, let's say, to prove that. It's just a gut feeling and, say, the benchmarks that they provided. Another aspect is the caching part. So based on the use case you have in mind, you can do really efficient caching. In one case, we've built an agent assist solution substantially. So call center agents, when they receive a phone call from a specific client, you have the client ID, you know the client's information that gets summarized and then provided to the agent. We cache that based on the client calling. So if the client calls back 5 minutes after because he needs to recall, he's pissed off, whatever, that information is cached, so you're not going to re-present the information a different way. Now, in this specific case here, each question can be different. So what you can do is do sort of fuzzy matching between the different questions you have. So you can build a cache that I would say has around 24 hours of memory. So you keep that in mind. And then you can map a question that the user has asked to previous questions that they or other users have asked and use a sort of cache, yeah.
Thank you both for a great presentation. I have a question about the topics discussed earlier about best practices. So you both talked about regulations versus innovation, right? How to sort of have that balance. And also, I think when we talked about interpretations of the regulations, so maybe if you could share with us an example or some thoughts around how do you push the boundaries of ways of working, right? On a brand new platform, a different environment, but that's still there to enable your business process while still meeting the spirits of the regulations.
Yeah, I'll go first. So I think I prefer when regulations provide guidelines, because I like having guidelines on how to do things. Okay, you need to go in that direction. Now, how I take it, how much I sort of go off-road, I think is part of the creative process that does allow innovation, because I don't like if you say you can't do this, or you have to do only this. You need to leave some freedom that does drive the innovation part, because otherwise everybody's going to do the same thing, we're all the same, and I don't really see any evolution or change there. Specific cases, I mentioned before the energy forecasting case, for example, where the regulation was, okay, you need to provide this information, rather than handle it, what substantially the authority did there was ask for certain performances from the model, okay? So in that way, it had tough constraints, and there was also economic incentives around these models. So substantially, they said 5% means no penalties and you have no incentives. Every percentage point below 5%, you're going to make 14K for that forecast. Vice versa, every percentage point above 5% of the mean average percentage error is minus 14K substantially. So incentivized you, let's say, performing well. The company that we worked with initially had done an RMA model, and that was not working well. They had to move to a machine learning approach. So I think that's one example where the authority, by putting maybe some hard, let's say, thresholds there, imposed the innovation, without even being aware of it, though. Because that's what I mean about interpreting it. I mean, some people could have gone against the regulations. Some people, I don't know, maybe necessarily didn't have to go the machine learning route. But it's about, okay, I have this problem, how do I solve it? And then machine learning, AI, but even other things can help solve these problems. So I think also it's about around the mentality with which you approach these regulations. So I don't know if you want to...
Yeah, I think we're operating in a really interesting time, because obviously I think that regulation is catching up with the speed of innovation, which leaves us quite a lot of scope to expand and to really explore what AI can do. I think when it comes to working with clients, the thing that we focus on is emphasizing our approach to practicing responsible AI, so that they can expand and explore within that framework, but also with the guardrails in place for safety purposes, particularly in life sciences and other regulated industries as well. So we have, the approach of the regulation providing a need for quality and information strategy, but also not really restricting so much. So having that wraparound of our approach to responsible AI is something that is fundamental at the moment.
Wonderful. Well, Tabitha and Gabriele, thank you very, very much for sharing with us and sharing your insights. I believe you're going to be around for the rest of the days, and certainly have a break coming up, so please feel free to continue asking these questions and continue the conversation.
So we, just for everyone to know, if you want to scan the QR code, you can download this presentation. We put it online, and then we'll potentially share it afterwards with everybody. And then I had a question. How much did you like the little robot that we created? I personally loved it. I think it was the best thing, but I'm hoping to have good feedback from you guys too.
And it sounds like very soon this will be available on the app. So you'll be able to get access to it if you're on Domino. Oh, I'm sorry? Within days. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.